much of what I'm going to talk about relates to children's mental health, but I'm hoping it's as applicable for everybody. And I guess I wanted to start with, thanking Jackie and being grateful for being here. When I thought about coming here yesterday, I felt really nervous about coming. I felt I didn't have the time to come. I felt like I was concerned that I might come and just be quite cynical, quite negative. I arrived, spoke to my colleagues on the panel. I think we all had the same concern that we were coming, feeling overwhelmed, stressed at work, all of those things. And within an hour and a half or so of being here, I feel completely different. I feel re-energized, I feel connected. And that's what can happen in an hour and a half. So I think I wanted to start there, really, because actually that's probably the point I want to make throughout, which is about how do we, myself and Paul Wallace were just talking about it, how can we create space, I suppose, ourselves to connect? Because for me, the 5-year forward view is about connection. And I think, Jackie, everything I think you said, Jackie, refers to connection. And for me, all of the work I do, certainly with children, all the thinking I do, has to be about connection. How do we connect children within their families and systems? How do we connect to those families and systems? So for me, I'm really excited by the 5-year forward view, but I suppose the questions that I have, and maybe we can discuss today, are how do we get there? Because first of all, actually, when I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, 5 years is not long enough. 5 years is not long enough. The scale of change that we're talking about. But actually, in the last hour and a half, I actually sat here and remembered that actually 5 years is too short, is too long. Is too long. It's too long for children because Geeta was talking about the developmental challenges, the amount of change. Rachel's a neuropsychologist, so I don't want to say things that she knows much more about. But, we know that in the first 2 years of life, brain plasticity is at its peak, and we give the least to that group of people. And again, Jackie's talked about perinatal, intervening early. Getting serious about prevention for me is, if we were really serious, actually, we would shift all our resource there. Probably. That might be controversial, so apologies to people who work in other parts of the services. But really, there's this scandalous lack of resource, I think, for those early years. So I think actually 5 years is too long. And I think that for me also, that one of the phrases that stands out about the 5-year forward view is about how do we hardwire mental health. I use the term hardwiring a lot in my work, but it's always in an attachment-based context. I'm going to assume that everybody's familiar with attachment theory. It's kind of everywhere now. But again, I think it's because 5-year forward view is about connection, relationships, I think there's a lot in there about attachment and the opportunities we have as psychological professionals to talk about these new connections that we need to make, because actually they're all about making new attachments to people at a time when I think it's very, very hard to just have attachments or encourage attachments in some of the children and families that we see, where we still use a language of, I was just saying it before, I think the word demand always fascinates me, because I think we can really quickly stray into feeling that people are demanding. To me, those two things become conflated and we lose sight of the fact that actually it's about need. So I think a broader argument, maybe not for here, is about the language that we use. And I think the 5-year forward and the 5-year forward view for mental health, I think it's the 5-year forward view talks about moving away from a factory model of care and repair. And there's loads of references. Geeta, you mentioned flowers. This idea of letting 1,000 flowers bloom. But in the paper, it's used in the context of not having so many different models of things. But actually, when it comes to children, we do actually need to work out how can we let each individual child bloom. How can we do that? I think that's a huge challenge. So hardwiring to me suggests it's about survival, a survival function. If we're truly to hardwire, I think, mental health, we need to use our voice to say that this is about survival. This is about survival. It's about being hardwired to maintain closeness, which is what we are all hardwired to do. But in that, to understand the threats and obstacles to closeness, and they are, for me, the major one at the moment is around fear, threat, anxiety. I think the American election, the things that have been happening here speak really loudly to that. The rising rates of anxiety in children, I think, are because we have a really highly anxious adult population. And I think that raises, it's a term that Jackie used about toxic stress. And the toxicity of that stress is felt most acutely in children. It's felt most acutely, and it actually has a real impact on brain structure, brain functioning, which lasts into the rest of our lives. So we've got to find ways to not allow this toxic stress, which I think is wider than the health system, it's wider than, it's in the social care system, it's in education, who are all retracting their own boundaries as we're trying to connect. I think we need to work on that concept of hardwiring and bring our knowledge and the kind of theories and things that we understand as psychological professions to talk about exactly how we do that. Because I'm convinced, you have to be convinced that we can do that. We can do that. So I think it is about relationships, and I think it's also about, again, I think Jackie, I love that Jackie brought her family, really, and I think that made me think a lot, again, about some of the things that quite easily get lost when we feel under stress ourselves and when our services are under stress. It's about how we truly feel people's stories, which is different, I think, to hearing things. I think it's how we really feel it. I'll give you an example of that. So this happened last week. A mum came to see me at work, and she'd got to me because people tend to get to me after making lots of complaints. So she'd got to me because everyone else had kind of found her so difficult to deal with. She was construed as too demanding, challenging, beyond help, no one can help her. Essentially, she's a mum with a son who's got severe autism, who has severely challenging behaviour. And this mum had been through a number of professionals, but chiefly some medical colleagues who'd basically said, well, there's nothing we can do to help, or they didn't think there was a mental health diagnosis, and it was about... And she came to see me, and the first thing she did, before she walked through it, she was in floods of tears, but actually what she had was her phone, and she just couldn't speak, but she wanted me to see a video, which was a video of her with her son. So she must have asked her husband, I think, to video it, and it's her in the middle of the night. You can see she's just got out of bed, she's in a dressing gown, and her son is... she's trying to hold her son, she's got a blanket, she's trying to kind of contain him, I think. And meanwhile, he's too strong for her. This is one of her worries, that he's getting much bigger, he's much stronger, and he's bashing her head against the door, I mean, with force. I feel upset even talking about it now, but I cried, and I think that it's so... We're not supposed to do that, are we, at work? I don't think we're supposed to do that. But I did, and it was so moving, and I just thought, how did it come to this, that she had to show me that? And she'd shown it to other people. I wasn't the first person she'd showed this to. So I think there's so much defensiveness in the system, unfortunately, and I think that we have to keep... remembering, I suppose, and exploring what our values are. And I think I don't know if people have seen the values-based, what's it called, the Values-Based Commission report. I've got 5 minutes left, Gita's just told me. Which talks about the need to explore and really research more research, I suppose, into what are values. It's about values-based commissioning for CAMHS, specifically this paper. It's literally just come out. And actually, we were one of the site visits in Liverpool, but they talk about the need to go back and revisit our assumptions and whether we have shared beliefs about what it is that we're actually doing. Because I'm not sure we have a shared view about what it is that we're doing. I'm not necessarily saying in this room, but I think outside of this room. And Peter Kindermid talks, I think I love the way he talks about the need to be creatively maladjusted to the medicalisation of distress, because we're never going to hardwire mental health we're never going to achieve the sorts of things I think the 5-year forward view sets out if we don't continue to be creatively maladjusted. So, and I suppose the other thing, I mean, that probably will come out, and I've referenced it with Paul there, is how we need space. I think we need to give support to the people, many of whom are probably in this room, who have the ideas and the enthusiasm somewhere inside to make these things happen that are in the 5-year forward view for mental health. Because I think to innovate and to learn, we need to have our own attachment needs met, because we know that's how we learn. But we need to be able to feel connected to other people who are thinking, partnerships for learning, those sorts of things. Because otherwise we'll carry on, and the reports on the front line, aren't they? And I'm on the front line, most of you are on the front line, is that there's no time to think. We're firefighting, we're reacting all of the time. But given, as I say, hour and a half, now 2 hours, already I feel I can think, and I don't know if that's true of other people. So I think we need to protect that space. Thank you.